Good evening, and welcome to the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. Tonight I have Greg from South Carolina. He has a pretty interesting story. So if you like angels and Bigfoot, you'll enjoy his story. We're going to go into a little bit about, where he's from and just a part of his life that I think the story's as important as the Bigfoot experience or encounter. And I'm going to hand it over to Greg, and I'll let him tell you as much or as little as he wants to. Greg, what would you like folks to know about you?
Okay, my name's Greg. I'm 62 years old. I was born in upstate South Carolina, near Greenville, uh, in what we call the foothills. Uh, Country boy, grew up on a farm, hunting, fishing, playing sports. That's about was my life. I have a 21-year-old adopted son attending Clemson University, which is the love of my life. And
Yes.
I had an experience. I moved up to the foothills of the mountains in Walhalla, near right at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in Walhalla, and I usually hunt down in the area where I'm from because we have so much family land and friends that would let me hunt. I never really hunted in the mountains. I fished a lot up there. I was a big fisherman. I fished a lot of bass tournaments, and I fished Lake Jocassee a good bit. Well, I decided I would try to hunt up Jocassee one day. Real rough place to hunt, mountains. I mean, you got to go there by boat. Uh, so I went one day and decided I was going to go scout a little bit. So I had my camo on. I was fishing till it warmed up, had my rifle and all. And as I was fishing along, I started seeing up on the mountain in front of me some limbs shaking. It sort of looked like a squirrel in a tree. And then I saw the antlers of a big buck that was making a tree shake, and I got excited. So I pulled up to the point there and decided I was going to try to climb the mountain up to about where I thought it was and try to cut it off. So I did that, and it was a rough climb. I mean, it was rough. But when I got up there, it wasn't 45 seconds after I got up there and laid down that this big, huge 8-point walked out. I shot it and killed it. It weighed 228 pounds. It
Wow.
had 8 points, and where its antlers come out of its head was almost 5¼ inches in diameter. Big buck.
Oh,
While
that
I
is a
was up
big
there, go ahead.
that is a big bug. You're
Yeah,
proud of
it
that,
was
huh?
the biggest one I'd ever killed, and I've always bow hunted. I've only killed maybe 3 deer in my life with a rifle, but probably over 100 with a bow. I just love the challenge of bow hunting. But anyway, while I was up there processing that deer, I noticed it was an old growth forest. I'd never seen a forest like this. Huge trees, deer sign everywhere. I mean, it was unbelievable. I'd never seen a place like this. It was almost spooky. It was dark, huge trees, scrapes and rubs everywhere, trails everywhere. So after I processed the deer and got home and all, I decided I'd go back up there and scout again and try to bow hunt it. So a couple of days later, I bought me a brand new Loggy Bio lock-on stand, went back to this spot, went up there, scouted around real good, found a good place to hang a stand, and I hung it and went on back home and decided I'd go the next afternoon to hunt. This was about 2020, 2019, roughly. So went back that next evening, got up there about 2 o'clock, 2:30, got in my stand, and it was sort of quiet. No wind. I didn't see no squirrels, nothing moving, no frogs. It was just weird. It was not like what I'm used to, but I just wrote it off as being in a different environment. I'd never hunted in a place like that. So I sat all afternoon, never saw anything, just never did feel comfortable the whole time though. So I usually sit completely in the dark, and back then I didn't carry a sidearm or nothing with me, nothing. My bow's all I had and a flashlight. So about 10 minutes before it got so dark I couldn't see the ground, I heard what sounded like a truck coming through the woods up above me, breaking limbs. Limbs were shaking, trees. So I assumed it was a bear. I'd never hunted in a place where there were bears, but I knew there was bears up there, so I just assumed it was a bear. So I got real quiet. But I was real uneasy about the whole thing. And then when it got parallel sort of to my right, to about my 3 o'clock. Whatever it was huge. I mean, it was dark, big, huge, and I thought, and it sort of did a huff like I would have. I've never heard a bear in the woods, so I don't know, but it was sort of a huff, like a huff, and it kept moving, and I got real nervous. I was like, man, I don't have a weapon. How am I going to get out of here? So I just sat there for about 30 minutes till all the noise settled. I felt like whatever it was gone. I climbed down real quick, scared to death, went down that mountain as fast as I could without getting killed to my boat, got in my boat. And I have never went back to that place. My stand, I guess, is still hanging on that tree unless somebody found it. And it didn't look like there'd been much traffic around there. I don't know, but I just didn't know what it was. And it bothered me for a long time. I always assumed it was a bear. And then one day at work, I started just got on Google and stuff and started asking questions about my experience to see if anybody had any ideas. And somebody mentioned Bigfoot. Well, Bigfoot wasn't even on my brain. The only thing I knew about Bigfoot was the Patterson Gimlin film, and I went to see the Legend of Boggy Creek when I was a young boy. It scared me to death then. That's the only two things, but I never assumed it was around in our area. I just was out of the loop. I had no idea about it. And so I I started researching, and as I started researching, I started reading things and seeing things that had happened then and had happened to me on my regular hunting area that I always wrote off as other things that blew me away. Like I listened to Greg House one time talking about him and his father getting a deer taken. Well, where I normally hunt at my down around my family's property, I have lost 3 humongous bucks that I know I hit perfect. I blood tracked them without using any kind of toilet paper or anything. It was hit so well to a spot where it looked like a massacre, but no deer. And I'm like, what happened to the deer? And I even took I had a redbone hound, Maggie, which could find anything. She would go there and just look at me like, I don't know what to do now. It's not here. I don't know what to do. She wouldn't go anywhere else. I just assumed the deer got up and went off, but I'm a good blood tracker. I couldn't find any place where the deer had left or went anywhere. And, I don't know if something had to pick those deer up and take them off. That's the only way those deer could not be where they were. They wasn't dragged. They just was gone. And I know for a fact that I hit them well. I don't take bad shots when I hunt. On 2 other occasions, I had killed does during the morning hunt about 10 o'clock and field rested and went back that afternoon about 2:30 and to find the gut pile just completely disappeared. Not a scrap sign or nothing, which I always thought was odd because I've seen coyotes get on a gut pile and you would know if coyotes or other predators had been on it. It just blew my mind. I'm like, how in the world did they clean that up in a couple hours time? It just blew my mind. I've had other things happen. Like I used to sit down there and I would always hear what I assumed was a gigantic woodpecker on a dead tree. He would peck 3 times, and then on the other side of me, a woodpecker would peck 3 times, but it was real loud. It was like it was a huge woodpecker and a hollow tree. I had no clue about wood knocking or none of that, Sasquatch or nothing. I don't know if that's what it was, but now that I look back on it, all of it looks suspicious. It looks suspicious. I've heard owls. I'm a big turkey hunter. I know what an owl sounds like. I know what the trill sounds like on the end of an owl hook. I've heard owls down there that didn't sound like owls that I always thought was strange. I always assumed it was other people slipping in trying to hunt where I was at that didn't know how to make an owl call. Just things like that started to come together. And the more I listened to sightings and encounters, and I started realizing, well, maybe I've been experiencing this, and that's probably what I heard when I was hunting up on Joe Cassidy. I don't know what else could have been. People said bears don't do what this thing done. I mean, it wasn't trying to be shy. It was making some racket. I mean, it was breaking limbs, moving trees as big as 4 inches in diameter, was tops of them were shaking. And it just scared me to death. And I've never told anybody until this year. I was sort of ashamed of it. I said, people ain't gonna believe this. They ain't gonna think that I experienced anything like this because I've never been around many people that had experience with Bigfoot or anything to that. I'm just out of the loop. I've never been into it until I started researching, and I've done thousands of hours of research since then. Watched videos, listened to encounters, and it's obvious to me that these things are real because as many people as have the same things happen all over the world, over and over and over, that's not a coincidence. It's just not a coincidence, and that's my experience that I had. And like I said, I don't know. I can't tell you it was a Bigfoot. I didn't see anything that I know was a Bigfoot. I just saw a big, dark figure go by me, and it was too big to be a bear. But I had no idea it could be anything else. I couldn't think of anything else that I knew of that would be in those woods that would be big, dark, that could do something like that. I just, like I said, I was very inexperienced, had no idea about Sasquatch or Bigfoot or anything. But the more I've researched, the more I've come to realize I've probably experienced this my whole life and just wrote it off as common everyday thing. Uh, my grandmother, I can remember my grandmother when I was a kid. She would always tell us, "Boys, be out of those woods before dark. The booger man will get you." And I thought that was just something she was telling to scare us. And she would always make me call her when I went hunting in afternoons when I got out of the woods to make sure I was out of the woods. And it makes me wonder, did she know something that she never told us? I don't know that, but it's just I didn't know what a booger was. I didn't know that a booger was what people in the South call a Bigfoot. I didn't know that, but that's sort of my experience as far as Bigfoot goes. I know it's not overwhelming experience, but I'm convinced after it happened, after listening to all the people I've listened to, that's more than likely what it was. And they've been sightings up on the Lake Jocassee area many times up and around that area. Matter of fact, I saw that Miguel and a guy was up there doing an expedition not long ago. That's what made me reach out to you. Really, is when he was up there, I said I need to tell somebody about this. Just get it off my chest and feel better about it. Like I said, I've never even told my wife, my son, never told my dad or anybody. And
Well,
it's just
well, I'll tell you this. First of all, dogs don't know how to lie, and I know a good scent dog, and I know a good scent dog. If they lose track of a scent, they're going to look for the scent, and if a dog stops, the scent is not there. And especially when you have a hunting hound. And Maggie was a red bone hound, wasn't she?
Maggie was the best dog that I've ever had. She was the most loyal, smart uh, dog and the best tracking dog. I've never but one time put her on a deer somebody shot and didn't find the deer, and I don't believe that deer died.
Well,
She
I
was
think little confirmations like that tell you what you already know.
right.
And
That's
and I think the second thing I would like to say to you is a lot of people that have activity around them, there is so many people out there that did not lay eyes on one, and everybody has something to contribute to, and your experiences and you know what you went through in the woods, it adds to the community, and everyone is equally as important and contribute as much as the other. Even someone that's had a sighting, your experiences are just as important. And when you look at your background, I mean, you were raised hunting, you were raised on the land, you were raised on the farm. South Carolina is a prime area for Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And when you're in a dense woods, we all know the woods get darker before everything else gets darker in the woods. And you see something that is so black run through the woods like a freight train. You don't have to be, for lack of better words than Einstein, to know it's not a bear. That's kind of the
Right.
get all for everyone. But I'll tell you this, and I get on my soapbox. You know that because I you watched the show. Do not let anyone make you feel ashamed for what you have experienced and what your conclusion is, because people that don't understand, you know, they're going to say a lot of things, but for someone that's going through it, your conclusion, your research, everything fits into a puzzle. You didn't go out looking for, owl sounds. They were already there. You didn't go
Right.
out looking for the missing deer, which is typical. The gut pile is, to me, it's almost like something scooped it up.
I had
And
to. I mean, like I
yes,
said, I
so
never even, nothing like that ever crossed my mind back before I started doing all this research, and then I started hearing about what they do, and it just makes sense. I mean, I tried to rule out everything that I knew from my knowledge as a hunter that could have made those situations happen, and nothing made any sense. Those deer I shot were dead. I promise you. If you would have saw the place where I found them, there's no way an animal could live with the amount of blood that I tracked and found laying where this deer had died. And it's gone. I mean, it's just missing. I didn't have a clue. I couldn't explain it. I thought somebody come in and stole it, maybe.
the land you were hunting on, did you hunt on that when you had your first experience? That was the first experience that kind of opened your eyes. That was when you were in the dense forest with the old
That was
road.
up in the mountains. That's the first time I'd ever hunted in the mountains. I'd never hunted up there. I always went back home to hunt. Had no experience in hunting in that area. Never did have any experience in old growth mountain forest like that. It was all new to me. Never been anywhere. But I know this. Something about that place was spooky. It was too quiet. No wind. No squirrels. No nothing. No birds. No frogs. That just don't happen where I'm used to hunting. I mean, it's something wasn't right, and I didn't know it at the time, but now that I look back on it after doing all this listening to people, I know what it was. I understand now. And
Was was it silent when you went in?
oh yeah, it was quiet when I went, but I wasn't paying. I didn't even think. I didn't think about how quiet it was until I got in my tree and realized I just expected to see a deer within an hour. I mean, so many signs up there. Are expected to see movement of some kind of critters, and it just wasn't nothing. I wasn't used to that. It just blew me away. I'm like, just quiet. I mean, no wind, no sound, no nothing, and I just was uneasy the whole time. I mean, I just didn't. I felt like something was not right, but I couldn't put a finger on it.
When you said it was crashing through the forest, um, can you kind of go a little bit more detail in that? What was it, breaking the saplings or was
It,
it
it,
breaking
it was break- it,
trees?
it was breaking saplings as it walked, whatever it was, and it was also appeared to be moving them with its either body, hands, or something or another, because I could see the top of these saplings moving back and forth, which means they either had to walk into them or move them with their hands. But it was like crack, crack, crack. This it was loud. I mean, I never heard anything like that. I mean, you could tell that whatever it was big and had a purpose. Where it was going, it was on a purpose. Uh, I don't think it smelled me because of the wind was not going from me to it. I'm real particular about the way I hunt my wind, and the wind was coming from a different direction. I don't think when it huffed, I don't. It almost when it huffed, it sounded like something that had emphysema or something, had a gurgle sound to it. You know what I'm saying? Just a raspy, like it was had a hard time getting it out, like it was had fluid in its lungs or something. That's what the huff sounded like. I've never heard anything like it ever. And I've never heard a bear in the woods, so I can't tell you what a bear. I've heard a bear huff on TV and at a zoo and all, but I've never heard. I've never been anywhere where a bear was where I hunted. But this, I don't believe this is bad. I mean, it's bears don't make. They're quiet. They don't make noise going through the woods like This thing did. This thing went through like it owned the place, and like it didn't care if something hurt it or not.
It was confident.
Yeah, it was whatever it was confident, and it scared the crap out of me. I can tell you that. I had some of the worst fear I've ever had in my life. I mean, I was scared to go down that mountain. I was wishing I'd have had my 44 with me, and just scared to death. Scared to death.
How
I
long did
wouldn't
it
go
take
back.
you?
I wouldn't go back up there and get that stand still hanging there. It's brand new. It's been hunted in one time. Brand new loggy bio lock on stand.
How long did it take you to get the confidence to leave your stand?
Well, about 35, 40 minutes, and I really didn't have any confidence then. It was just a matter of I knew I had to go down that mountain, and I couldn't sit there all night, or my wife would have, call 911 looking for me. And so I just about 30 minutes when I felt like I could hear nothing. It was just quiet as could be. I got down and I went down as fast as I possibly could. I mean, and I tried to be quiet too, but it's hard to be quiet going out of place you're not really. That's the first time I'd ever been out of there in the dark, and I didn't have it marked. It was just a trail that went straight down the ridge to a point on the lake to where my boat was.
Wow.
It was scary.
At what point did you start feeling like the relief that you felt like you were going to be safe leaving there? Was it when you hit your boat?
When my mercury cranked, that's when I felt safe. I
Uh,
backed that boat out into the lake. I don't know if you know anything about Lake Jocassee, but Lake Jocassee it's a lake where they real deep. They backed up in between two mountains, and Duke Power did it, and they built a holding lake called the Bad Creek Project up above, and they've got a turbine that goes down through the mountain. They cut a hole in the mountain, and they dump water from that top holding lake down through that mountain into Jocassee and generate peak power. And that's where, and it's real crystal clear. It looks like a lake you'd see out in California. You can see the bottom in 20 foot of water. I mean, it's crystal clear, never gets muddy, real deep, hard to fish. But it's a lake that holds more state records. It's the newest lake in South Carolina, but holds more state record fish than all the rest of the lakes in the state combined. It holds the world record red eye river bass. It's full of trout. It's got rainbow trout, brown trout, bass, brim, all the other normal fish around this area, but has huge trout in it, huge trout.
so is
And
that
there's
land?
no, go ahead, it's a national forest. There's no houses. You can't, all the land around that lake is national forest. The only houses on it is right up at the boat ramp, and that's owned by the Devil's Fork State Park, and they rent out some cabins and all, but it's just nothing around this lake, nothing but woods and hills and mountains and waterfalls. A lot of waterfalls dump off of the mountain into this lake. You
Greg,
need to
how
Google
far?
it sometime. Google Lake Jocassee sometime. You can go on YouTube and just put Lake Jocassee view, and it'll give you an aerial view of the whole lake. It's the most beautiful place in the southeast, in my opinion.
I might have to take a road trip out there.
It's
Now,
worth it's worth going just to see.
how far is that land from the land that you would normally hunt, where you had to gut
It's
files?
about an hour, probably about 75 miles away up the hill. I mean, it's going where I was at is in the foothills. You go up the mountain about 75 miles. It's right on actually part of that lake's on in North Carolina, South Carolina and North Carolina. You have a point on it where you cross the North Carolina state line, and you have to have a North Carolina fishing license to fish.
Well, I'll tell
And
you, when it comes to fish in South Carolina is a lot more lenient than North Carolina.
yeah,
I don't.
Whitewater Falls. I don't. Have you ever heard of Whitewater Falls? That's a tourist spot up up on the South Carolina, North Carolina line. It's a big waterfall that people go up to see, and it just huge waterfall that drops off. It's right
Is,
up above it.
is that near Sky Valley, Georgia?
Uh,
Like Boston City and
no, not really. It's near Table Rock. They call it Table Rock. Table Rock, South Carolina. It's near uh, Whitewater Falls. Yes. If you go out of Anderson, South Carolina, go through Clemson, up the mountain, it's Highway 28, and then you hit a big highway called Highway 11, which is called a scenic highway. It's an old Indian trail. That Highway 11 goes from South Carolina all the way up to North Carolina up toward Table Rock, and that lake is to the left on up there about halfway. It's a gorgeous place. Gorgeous place.
Are you still there? Okay.
Yeah,
Now, wait, I'm pulling it up on the Earth Good as we talk. Now, going back to you've been hunting all your life. You're a seasoned hunter. I mean, there's just no doubt about that.
yeah.
Looking back, growing up hunting, you've been hunting how many years?
I
Oh, yeah,
hunted,
that's
been
right there
hunting
in the
for
mountains.
over 50 years. I've been hunting over 50 years. I was
So,
hunting when I was 6 years old, and that's
yeah, I
hunting
see it right here.
everything.
That is gorgeous.
It's a beautiful place.
So when you're looking back, yeah. So when you're looking back and you're hunting with your dogs, was there ever any times your dogs were acting strange?
Uh, no, Maggie never. Maggie
That
was not
makes
scared of
sense now.
anything. Maggie would have not backed down. She would have got killed by a Bigfoot before she would have let it come at me or bother anything else. That was the most protective dog I've ever seen. She, when I adopted my son, she was probably 6 years old, and she took him as her own puppy. I mean, she would not let anybody get near him or get rough with him or do anything. Even me, if she thought I was playing rough with him, she'd walk up growl. She was not a mean dog, but she loved that boy. And one day I was going to walk her on her leash, and I had my son was about 6 months old, and I had him in my arm and had her on a leash. And I went outside, and across the street they were building a house. The contractor pulled up on a big flatbed truck and had a giant white German Shepherd. Jumped off of that truck and started up toward the yard. And I yelled at him. I said, "You better get that dog." He said, "Oh, he won't bother you." I said, "I'm not worried about him." I said, "If he gets near this boy," I said, "this redbone will kill him." And he got real cocky. He said, "Well, you ain't got to worry about him. I ain't never seen him get whooped." I said, "Well, you fixing to if you don't get him turned around." And he got about 25 yards from us, and Maggie turned around backwards. I always kept her collar loose, and she backed that collar over her ears and went down there and jumped on that dog and put 126 stitches in that dog. Almost killed him. I had to pull her off of him
Oh my
because he
goodness.
got close to my son. But she, like I said, she was normally not mean, but she was protective of me and that boy. And I don't think, now, I don't know what she'd done if she'd have saw a Sasquatch, but I don't think she'd have backed down to it. This dog caught a 50-pound beaver one time, jumped in a beaver pond, caught a 50-pound beaver in the water, killed it, and brought it home up the side of a mountain hill and laid it in the driveway. And it was in the driveway with her when I got home from work at lunch. You got to be tough to kill a beaver.
Maggie was a tough woman, I tell you
She's a
that.
tough dog. I, Redbone hounds are the toughest breed I've ever seen. Like I said, I'd put her up against any pit bull, any other kind of dog in the world. When they bear hunt up in the mountains, they run the bear with what they call walker hounds. But when they get one bayed and they send a dog in to get up on the bear, that's a redbone. They'll send a redbone, and the redbone will jump up on top of that bear and get it by between the ears of the skin behind it, between its ears, and ride it. They ain't scared of it. It's just
Wow.
the way they are. Yeah, they're. And I had another one named Red. He just passed away a couple of weeks ago, man. I miss old Red. He was a
Yeah.
good tracking dog too, but he wasn't. Maggie was the best I've ever seen.
The best
The
working
best.
dog I ever had was a female, and the females seemed to be a tad bit more protective.
Yeah,
And
I believe female dogs are my favorite too. I believe they're tougher. Uh, they're also more loving, but they're more loyal. I mean, I just like a female dog, and you don't have to worry about them running around chasing other dogs all the time like a male dog does. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. So have you went back out in the woods since you've had that encounter?
Oh yeah. I hunted until I had a. I was in the hospital about 2.5 years ago with a spinal infection, and I almost was paralyzed. And I still have problems with feeling in my feet and hands, and I can't hunt. I definitely couldn't bow hunt, and I just can't walk and do things I used to could. But up until then, I hunted 4 or 5 days a week during deer season. I live for deer season. Quail, dove hunted. A lot. We always had a big dove field. My family had a big dove field. I love that. My dad was a big bird hunter. He come from the low country down around Estill, South Carolina, which is down near Savannah, Georgia. And him and his dad were bird dog trainers. They raised bird dogs and trained bird dogs. And he liked quail hunt. I was never really good at it, but he was very good at it. My dad was one of the best shotgun shots I've ever seen. I mean, if he pulled the trigger, it was down.
I, I go to Savannah because, I have relatives there, but every time I pass Santee, I always think that would be the perfect Bigfoot habitat.
I wouldn't doubt it. There's down where he's from, Estill is one of the biggest places that people go to lease deer hunting property. I mean, it's very expensive. There's a lot of deer, hogs, quail, all kinds of stuff, a lot of wildlife, and it's very expensive to rent a place down there. I wish I still had my dad's place. I could get rich off of it.
Let's step back to your deer that you lost. If you hunt for with a bow, there's no shot that's fired on that. So obviously you field dressed it. It watched you the whole time and waited for you to leave to take the gut pile. How does that make you feel?
Now that I look back on it, it makes me a little nervous. I'm glad I didn't know it back then, to be honest with you. I wouldn't have wanted, I probably wouldn't have been as confident hunting in the woods if I'd have known what I know now back then.
I think we have all that's had experiences and encounters have realized we're not the alpha dogs out there in the forest, so to speak.
Hmm.
So you were telling me about your dog and how protective it was over your son. Getting off the Bigfoot subject because your story and the walk you have in life to me is as important as your experiences. You had an incident where your son was in the hospital. You want to
Yeah,
go into that?
yeah. I've always been a Christian and had faith and believed in, and I'm not trying to preach. I'm just telling you what I believe. I've always believed in God and had faith. But when my son was 17 years old, I now am a knower. I'm a God knower. I'm not a believer. I'm a knower. And I'll tell you why. When he was 17, he woke up one Saturday and he had a blood blister between his lip and gum. And when he popped it, it bled. So my wife got real nervous. She carried him to the urgent care, and they said it's just a symptom of a virus. Nothing we can give him, and sent him home. Well, the next morning he woke up with about 15 of them, and my wife got real nervous, and she carried him to a different urgent care uh, under a different hospital system, and they immediately sent him to the hospital, and his lips started burning, like, I mean, physically looked like they were burnt, and the inside of his mouth started burning. And we went to that hospital, and they spent all day. They run every virus panel you could run, and the doctor told me, he said, "Sir, I don't know what's wrong, and we can't find." I said, "Well, listen, I don't mean to be rude or ugly, but if you think I'm gonna let you let my son die because you don't know what's wrong with him, you got another thing coming." I said, "You need to get on the phone and get some help." He said, "We've already called the Augusta Burn Center because he's starting to get burns on his lips and throat and all, and we're gonna send him down there. It's about 2.5 hours away to see if they can figure out what was wrong with him." Now, I've never prayed one time that day about God help my son. I was worried about what the doctors could figure out. That's all was on my mind. So about lunchtime that day, my wife said, "You need to go get us something to eat and get away. Let's get away from each other for a few minutes while we're waiting on the ambulance." The ambulance was going to take him down to Augusta. So it was during COVID, and there was nobody hardly in the hospital. It was quiet. I went down to the elevator door. No, not a door open in the hall. All the doors shut. Not a sound. You couldn't hear nothing. I pressed the button. Waited on the elevator. It dinged and the door opened. I walked in. Not a soul inside. And when I turned around, what I describe as a handsome young man, about 5'10" maybe, with eyes that were so blue they looked like lights, walked in the elevator and looked me straight in the eye. And this, nobody knew we were at the hospital except me, my wife, and my son. Our family didn't even. He looked at me straight in the eye and said, "Sir, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you and your son? God sent me here to pray for y'all." And I was like, I looked at him, I said, well, how do you know my son's here? Because God sent me here to pray for y'all. Well, that blew me away. I got a little bit worried about it because the hair was standing up on my neck. It was real. The temperature had dropped when he walked in. And I said, well, where did you come from? I said, you wasn't in the hall when I pressed the button. He said, I come from across the hall. I was in the room across the hall, which I didn't believe. He still didn't have time to get in that elevator. It just freaked me out. And I said, well, listen, he said, can I come pray for your son and you? I said, yeah, he's in a room. He said, yeah, I know what room he's in. He's room 619. I said, well, how did you know that? And that freaked me out even more. He said, because God sent me here to pray for him, which people don't talk like that. Preachers don't even talk like that. And I said, well, I'm going to get me and my wife some food. I said, I'll be back in about 45 minutes. If you want to go on in there, you can go pray for Braden. I said, I'll be back. So I didn't think much more about it. I was sort of freaked out. I went and got food, come back, walked in the room, and I said, Lynn, did some strange guy with blue eyes, it looked like there was lights, come in the room and pray for him? She said, what are you talking about? About that time he walked in the door. And when he did, my wife's words were, man, it got cool in here all of a sudden. He walked in, introduced himself, didn't call his name. All he said was, God sent me here to pray for Braden and the father. And I want to pray, I'm going to start by praying for Braden. Well, he looked at Braden and started praying sort of like a normal preacher would pray, ask for Braden to get, for God to heal Braden and make him better. I was sort of watching him with my head bowed. I was watching his feet, and he turned toward me and said, now, he said, God, I want this father to know that the doctors have nothing to do with this illness that Braden had. I want him to know that you initiated this sickness on Braden. You know the exact reason why, and you know the second you're going to heal him. Well, I've been around church my whole life, and no preacher prays like that. This guy prayed as if he just talked to God a few minutes before, and God gave him a message to tell me. He was that confident. He didn't say if he's going to heal him. He said the second he's going to heal him. And he left. My wife said, man, he was weird, wasn't he? I said, oh, beyond weird. I said, did you see them eyes? She said, yes, they look like lights, didn't they? I said, I ain't never seen nothing like it in my life, man. That guy was either an angel or somebody God sent here specifically for some reason. I said, he knew too much. I said, there's no way he could know me and my son was here sick. He couldn't know what room he was in unless he had some kind of divine knowledge. So I never did think nothing else about it. We went on down to Augusta, and they diagnosed my son with something called Stephen Johnson syndrome, which causes severe burns on you. He had third-degree burns on his lips, throat, mouth, stomach, and they said there's no medicine for it. It's just a virus. We'll have to keep him either incubated or whatever until he gets over it. Well, he kept getting worse and worse. He was spitting up skin, blood, and stuff 20 hours a day. We had to hold a pan up under his mouth. It got so bad we had to get a dental suction thing to suck it out because he was choking. Had a feeding tube in, looked like, his lips looked like you took a blowtorch to them and burned them. That's how burnt they were. Just caked with burnt blood. It was the most awful thing. We stayed up 24/7 with him. Well, after about 12 days, he kept getting worse and worse. And my son was not a quitter. He was a champion. He was the best athlete in school. Never has made a B in his life. He's a winner at everything he's done. He said, Dad, I can't fight no more. I said, boy, you ain't giving up. I said, you ain't giving up. And I told my wife later on, I said, Lynn, he's going to die if they don't figure out what's wrong with him. I said, something inside me tells me they diagnosed him wrong. I said, I don't know. And I told his doctor, I said, you're wrong, doctor. I said, he's got something else. I said, he's not going to live through this if you don't figure out what's wrong with him. And the doctor was real confident. Oh, no, we know what it is. It could take a month. I said, he ain't going to live a month. I know my son. I said, I got a feeling inside. So probably about 4 days from when I thought he might last 3 or 4 more days if they didn't figure it out. My wife said, would you go home, wash all our clothes, get Braden some more clothes, and come back? Now, this was a 2.5 hour drive. I didn't want to leave. I said, I don't want to leave him. If he dies, I'll feel bad. She said, don't say that. I said, let me tell you one thing. I'm going to do it. If he dies while we're gone, I'll haunt you the rest of your life. That's what I'm telling you right now. So reluctantly, I got in the car. I drove home. Got home that afternoon about 5 o'clock, and I started washing clothes and all. I couldn't sleep. I mean, just nervous, waiting on the phone to ring at any minute. So about 4:30 the next morning, the phone rang, and it was my wife's cell phone. I was crying. I was scared to answer it, and I answered it like this. I said, "If you tell me Braden died, I will haunt you from now on." She said, "No, you're not going to believe this." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Some guy walked in green doctor scrubs a while ago and stared at Braden for about a minute and said, 'Son, you look like you feel miserable. And I'm pretty sure they diagnosed you, and I'm pretty sure I know what's wrong with you.' And called the nurse in, told her to draw blood, walk it to the lab, wait on it, and walk the results back. Well, she said when he come back, she said, 'Yep, I'm right. He's got mycoplasma bacteria infection, which is so rare that only 10% of the world's population is capable of getting it due to a genetic DNA thing. You got to have a certain marker in your DNA to even be able to get it. And what it is, it's the same. It's the same infection that would cause me and you walking pneumonia. But somebody that has that kind of DNA structure, it causes this violent reaction the first time, and it killed every immune cell he had. They give him about $100,000 worth of hemoglobin in 2 days' time
Oh
just to
my
try to
God.
rebuild his immune system. I mean, this kid was in bad shape. And she said, "Sir, how do you know? How did you know that?" Now listen to this. Listen to this. And think about the angel telling me God knows the second he's gonna heal him. Think about this whole thing. This was his words. Because I'm one of the two doctors that 29 years ago they sent to Africa to a tribe that was dying of this disease, and we discovered this disease 29 years ago in Africa. Now you tell me what the odds are of one of the two doctors in the world that discovered this disease is going to walk in my son's room at 4:30 in the morning and diagnose him with what was wrong with him. About he said he had about 4 more days. All he needed was uh, uh, azithromycin intravenously for a few days, and it killed it. And once they have it, they'll never get it again. The first reaction is always causes this. From then on, they'll just have walking pneumonia. Now, you can say what you want. You can say that was all coincidence. If you do, I got a bridge in the middle of the United States over the ocean, I'll say, because that's not an accident. That whole thing was, I firmly believe, this is my belief. I've read the Bible through 7 times. The Bible says that the angel Gabriel, which is one of the archangels, had the most brilliant blue eyes of anyone ever. Well, that describes this guy that was in that elevator. This guy in that elevator knew stuff that nobody could know unless they were a divine being and knew God. There's no way he could have known what he knew. Okay. He told me up front that God initiated this illness on Brady. He knew the exact reason why, which I believe was to make a point to me. Don't worry about the doctors. You need to give this to me. You need to pray about it. And I hadn't done that. I think that was the whole point. And 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 I believe that's why this whole thing transpired. And I, to this day, you'll never convince me that this wasn't an angel. And if it wasn't Gabriel, he had the most brilliant blue eyes I've ever seen in my life. And there was something about him that was different. He had an aura about him. He made you feel like your hair was standing up when he was in your presence. I mean, you knew he was in the presence of something different when this guy was around. And for that doctor to come in, he wasn't even supposed to be working. That doctor got called at the last minute because some doctor's wife had got sick, and he had to fill in. He come from over 2 hours away to fill in his shift that night. And you tell me all that was a coincidence? Ain't no way. I mean, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'm not an idiot either. All that was orchestrated by God. I believe that, and to this day, and you'll never make me believe any different. Now, I think I saw a Sasquatch, but I know I saw an angel. There's no doubt in my mind, and I know from now on I don't need faith to comfort my belief in God. I have actual proof that God exists and God does what He says He's going to do, and He's real, and He showed Himself to me in the flesh. I don't know where his flesh is gone. I don't know what this guy was, but he looked like he was in the flesh. Um, that's the most amazing thing I've ever experienced in my life right there, and I'll never forget that long as I live. And you'll never convince me any different. I'm comfortable. I'm sleeping out knowing that I know what happened. And to me, it's as clear as a bell what happened. It's clear as a bell.
That's divine intervention
No doubt about it.
of a God that loves you.
You can't. I mean, I know how much I love my child, and I would do anything for my child. There is nothing, period, I would do for my child. And God's the same way about us. He feels the same way about us. That's how much He loves us. It's hard to fathom and hard to understand, but it's the truth. And He proved it to me at that point. Out of all the millions and billions of people in the world, He took the time to make a point to me and show me that He was real and save my son's life. And you know, I don't know what to say. It's overwhelming to think about. I almost cry every time I talk about it. And it's overwhelming.
When you go about your life now and you've seen that kind of power, the grace that was extended to your son, when I'm trying to think of a good way to put this because I don't plan questions or the route the show takes, but I do believe that Bigfoot is just a small part of everyone's story, and sometimes the bigger story has nothing to do with the experience of Bigfoot. I do when you pray now after that event, even when it seems like it's not being heard, with confidence that he hears you. That's
Oh
how I
yeah,
feel. Is that how you feel?
yes, there's no doubt about that. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Once you make that exception, you accept uh, Jesus Christ as your Savior. And I'm not trying to preach. I'm just telling you what I know. It ain't. I don't believe it. I know it now. Once you do that, you're in His heart, and He's gonna take care of you from then on. No matter how bad you fail, because we all gonna fail. We never live up to what we're supposed to. Never. You're not gonna do that. But He's not gonna. He's not gonna abandon you. You can bet on that.
Well, I want you to do me a favor. I want, when you talk about that, not apologize to people and say that I'm not cramming my faith down your throat, because you're allowed to talk about your walk with God and your experience. And on the show, I have many people, and I have many people that are agnostic and don't, kind of on the fence. And I have some people that just flat out don't, believe in God. They all have a platform and they're all welcome to speak about what they do believe in.
And
And
that's one reason that I'm talking to you instead of somebody else. That's one of the main reasons I'm talking, because I knew that. I've listened to your show enough to know that, and I've heard where you stand on it, and I've heard you allow people to say that, and you defend their right to say that, and that's one of the main reasons. When I decided to talk about it, I decided you was the right person.
well, I think that is an honor, and I think your story is incredible. And I'm gonna be just frank with you. When I started, my little podcast, it was all about Bigfoot. And then I realized there's so much more to people than an experience or an encounter. The journey they take in life, the lessons that they leave us with, the stories that we grow from. There's so much more to a person than, a an experience in the woods or a sighting of a Bigfoot. Do not get me wrong; it is it to me that's my passion, but there's so much more texture to a person. There's so much more substance to a person. And I tell people, the people that believe in God, and I'm not trying, to preach, because we all know that you can be agnostic, atheist, as long as you're not personally attacking me, I'll give you a platform. But the at some point we've got to quit apologizing for our beliefs and what we've experienced. The same as in the Bigfoot world, we got to quit giving people the power to tell us what we have or have not experienced. And we have to learn to accept each other. And you know, I'll share something with you. And you know, I've talked about my near death experience. This show isn't about me, but there was a part that when I was sharing my near death experience, I shared it twice on the 10 Foretales, and I shared it on Mark and Rebecca's show, Cedar Creek Bottoms and Farm Life Farmstead. And the one part I left out about my near death experience was about a month before I it was still cold, and I would say about 6 months before I had the wreck that I had my near-death experience with. I was on patrol one night, and I was on the outskirts of the county, and there's a small rural store on the edge of the county at the county line. And when I was going through there, I saw this heavy set black male sitting outside the store, and it was closed. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I pulled up and I asked him, was he okay? Do you need a ride somewhere? And when he was talking, it was almost like he had like Down syndrome. I can't, it was just something off. And he told me that he was fine, that somebody was coming. And I remember, I don't know if you remember the flight jackets that you used to wear. They were like black on the outside and
Yeah.
orange on the inside. They were really warm. And for whatever reason, he was so much bigger than me because I was, you know, I wasn't petite anymore, but he was just a lot larger to me. And I just remember getting out of my patrol car and taking off my coat. Was I didn't want him to freeze, and I said, I tell you what, I said, just put it over your shoulders and keep your hands warm or something. And you know, he put that coat on and it fit him perfect. Okay. And I says, when's the last time you had something to eat? He said, and well, it's been a while. And I says, well, you know, I worked for a small county at the time, you know, and I was like, I really didn't have any money. I said, but you know what? Wait right here. So I drove like 10 miles back into the small town that was in the county, and I went to the jail, and I asked them at the jail, I said, please tell me that you have something I can take this gentleman to eat. And they hooked me up with some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and some orange and some of those little juice boxes. And so I got them like 2 bags, like lunch bags of stuff, and I shot down the road and I gave it to him. And I says, well, look, let me go check the store because I have to check the store on my you know, security run. And the store was little, and it was cold, and I didn't have a jacket because he had my jacket. So I just rode around the store with a spotlight, not because he was there, but because, you know, that was the purpose of me going to the store.
Right.
And I drove back around the store. It didn't take me probably 40 seconds to go around that store, and he was gone. I drove
Mm.
up the road this way, up the road that way, checked the store again. He was nowhere to be found, just disappeared. And I always
Mm.
looked back and I always wondered if that was an angel. And because of the way I treated him, was that why I was given a second chance? I
That's a
always wondered.
very good possibility. Because that's how he works. That's how God works. Uh, he puts you in situations to see how you're going to respond. I
Well,
believe that.
I was an angry little supervisor on there. I had an attitude. I was angry with the world. I was kind to people, but you know, I I always leave that out of the story. And to me, that's the most important part of the
It
story.
is. That is, and you're probably. I think you're right about that. And I'll tell you something else. As far as my belief, I've listened to a bunch of people talk about Sasquatch, and I believe what Sasquatch is. I believe, without a doubt, Sasquatch is a descendant of the Nephilim and the fallen angels. The reason I believe that because of all the different things they can do that a normal flesh and blood animal can't do, and the fact that I've heard so many people say that they rebuked them in the name of Jesus Christ, and they responded to that rebuking. A normal animal wouldn't respond if you went out and said, I rebuke you to come near me in the name of Jesus Christ. A bear or any other kind of animal, they wouldn't get that. But the fact that they do, and I've heard Greg House say that he rebuked them one time. They was fixing to get him in his deer stand, and he rebuked them in the name of Jesus Christ, and they immediately left. A normal animal wouldn't do that. They would have to
Now,
know who Jesus Christ is to respond like that. And also the fact, I listen to Kumbo Baker a lot, and he uses that shofar horn, which is the voice of God. And it says in the Bible that the beast of the earth will respond to the voice of God, which is a specific horn like the one they used when they blew and the walls of Jericho come down. He gets the same response every time he blows that. That's another reason I believe. And let's see, what was his name? Scott Carpenter. He rebuked them from his property. They were harassing his house, and he went to the four corners of his house and rebuked them in the name of Jesus Christ, and they immediately quit coming on his property. A normal animal wouldn't do that. I mean, a bear, a wolf, or anything, they wouldn't respond to that. That's my belief. I believe that.
well, let me ask you this, because I don't know exactly where I'm at. Some days I lean more toward that. Other days I'm just, flesh and blood. I don't know where I'm at because every time I think I'm getting close to a conclusion, I get side. I'm like somebody just comes and just blindsides me, but and I'm like, well, okay, that's another piece to the puzzle. Maybe I'm not on the right track, but for the people that think they're Nephilian, what if there is, and I'm just throwing this out there, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm sure I'll get comments on it, and it's okay because the, it's a discussion that it's a great discussion to have. What if they are Nephilian and they are fighting a battle of good and evil, and they're looking at us with the answers? Some are leaning toward fallen angels, some still have that residual memories of being a good seed. Or, I mean, it's just like, you know, just like what's passed down to you in your blood. If you come from a family of hunters, most people are natural hunters. When you come from a family of athletes, most people, are athletic in their bloodline. Like, you know, the part of me that, I've always been drawn to the earth, nature. Well, that's my bloodline and my ancestry. So what if there's a battle of good and evil with them and they're looking at us for the answers? Because I'm thinking we're pretty screwed up to look for answers from. Why?
Well, the way I understand it, the fallen angels, there were good angels and there were bad angels. There was some of both. And I think you got the same thing in the Sasquatch world. You got some bad ones and some good ones. But the fallen angels, the Nephilim, are not going to go to heaven. I mean, that's God said that. They're doomed. They're not going to heaven, and I think they know that. And I don't know what their purpose is. I don't know. Now, I'm not saying I know anything, but I'm just saying for them to do the things that I've heard them do, and for them to respond to being rebuked in the name of Jesus Christ and obeying that, all that ties together is they have to have some connection to God somehow, and the fallen angels is what makes sense. And it even says in the Bible, there's a lot of the tribes uh, that back in the older Bible days in the Old Testament that were Nephilim people. I mean, they were even dog-headed people back then. Talking about dog men. They were. I mean, there's drawings of dog men in Egypt right now that were drew thousands of years ago. There were tribes that they used to battle against that were Nephilim. I mean, they were giants. And even when Moses went and took the people and they tried to go into the Holy Land, they I remember their scripture. It says we have no chance against them. They're giants. Well, a lot of them were Nephilim. I mean, they were the fallen angels mated with earthly women and had giant children. It says that in the Bible. And they were before the flood and they were after the flood. I don't know how they survived it, but according to God, they did because they were before the flood and they were after the flood. And I think these are bloodlines. These things are bloodlines of that. That's just my opinion. it explains everything to me. I mean, and I've heard too many people say, stuff like when they mind speak and they the knowledge they have and the disappearing and like I said, rebuking them in the name of Jesus Christ and responding to the voice of God. You need to listen. You need to research Carter Bushart. You need to listen to his take on it. He's had some experiences that are more woo, what they call woo, and he's convinced, and I'm convinced he's right that these things are something to do with that. And
Wait a minute. Let me write his. Text me his name. I'll try to get him on the show.
yeah, I mean he'll be one of the best interviews you've ever had. I just love listening to him. You can type his name in on type Sasquatch Carter Bushart, and I'm telling you, listen to his testimony and some of the things that happened to him.
Well, let me ask you this. There are times when people have observed or experienced a Bigfoot or Sasquatch or hairy people show compassion to a human being, show compassion to an animal. What's your take on that? Because there's a seed of good to do that.
My take is the fallen angels that come down, they were some of them were good angels and some of them were bad angels. You had Satan, which wanted to be God. I mean, he was a bad angel, and I think you got good and bad in all things. I think you got good bears and you got bad bears. You got good people, you got bad people. I think you got good Sasquatches and you got bad Sasquatches. I think the majority of them are good and do not want to harm us. I think they're curious about us. I think they actually probably want to help us, but they don't want. They don't want. For some reason, there's certain people that they tag and they touch base with, and they feel comfortable with. I don't understand that. I don't even want to try to think about how
Well,
complicated that is. But
well, let
there's
me ask.
some reason that is.
Well, let me ask you this: when you had your encounter in the woods when you were bow hunting, and it come through the woods like a freight train, we both pretty much can reasonably say that was probably a Bigfoot. Was that before or after the experience with your son when?
Before that was before he was even born. He wasn't born in 2003. This happened in 1999 or 2000. And another weird thing about that whole experience right there that happened. And I didn't tell this because I don't nobody think I'm crazy. But one morning about 8 months ago, I was awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning with a strong desire to go to YouTube and listen to a podcast. And when I did, it was the first one on there was Linda Eastman. Okay. And she had a woman on there, and this happened in Highlands, North Carolina, which where it happened by the way the crow flies is probably 12 miles from where my experience happened. There was this woman that lived there, and she had a pond behind her house, and she wanted to make that pond bigger, so they did some explosives. And when they did, it caved in a, a cavern where some Bigfoots were living and caused it and total lost everything they had. And they went from being peaceful to start harassing the crap out of her. And I started listening to that story, and it was fascinating. Well, what's more fascinating about it, when she first started telling it, this woman was so uh, messed with by those people, she hired a bodyguard. And the bodyguard was happened to be an ex FBI. Now, listen to this. I bought my wife, in 2014, I bought my wife a used Explorer, and it was owned by a former FBI agent from Highlands, North Carolina. So I got online and sort of sent some emails back and forth and found out who that guy was. And he was the guy that owned the car that I bought for my wife all these years later. That's a connection between that situation and where I was at when that happened to me. Now, whether it's tied together or not, I don't know, but it's mighty strange that I was awakened and urged to listen to a YouTube broadcast, and the one I listened to is somewhat tied, I feel like, to me and that experience I had. I mean, those creatures wouldn't have been 10 or 12 miles apart from where that happened.
I'm gonna tell you two things right quick. 6 degrees of separation. Have you ever heard that theory? How we're
Yes,
all.
yes, I have.
Another thing is don't call you. It's okay to sound a little crazy because I'm gonna tell you straight up. I would rather be around crazy people because normal is overrated.
Right,
And if you if you're not a little bit crazy, you haven't lived and you haven't experienced. So
right.
it's okay. It's okay to sound crazy because, like I said, normal is so overrated. And if not, I don't want to be normal. But I'll tell you, I really like Linda's show. I hope one day that my show could be as professional as and well put together as hers. But she does. I remember that episode, and I remember the lady that they called in to get the answers of what was going on, and that was a really good show.
You talking about the one I listened to?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a very interesting thing, and the lady that went in and figured it all out. Yeah, it was fascinating, and it's just strange to me that the bodyguard she was talking about happened to be the guy that I bought his car, and he was involved with protecting her from Sasquatch, and those Sasquatch were about 10 or 12 miles from where I saw, well, I can't say I saw, where I had my encounter, which what I think was a Sasquatch. All that's just strange to me. I don't know if it's, that's, you have a lot of that kind of strangeness in this Sasquatch world. I mean, that's why I said you really need to look Carter Bushard up. When you listen to him, he works for the BFRO, but he's not, he don't believe in their stance of not talking about the woo or the supernatural factor. He believes it exists. He's had experience, and once you listen to him, you'll understand why. And he'll flat out say he don't agree with him on that point.
Well, the best thing I can say to you, as far as the vehicle and it being linked to a event that happened near you, don't question the journey. Just go where the journey takes you, Greg. Go where it takes you.
I tell you what, I've enjoyed the research I've done and learning about these things because if that hadn't happened to me, I would never know what I know now. And it's fascinating to me. Uh, I hope one day to be healthy enough to go to one of these meet Greeks. I really enjoyed the Woodwalkers bunch of guys, Greg House, Spencer
Have,
Harrison, and that bunch. I
have you
would
talked
feel
to Greg?
comfortable with them.
Have you had the opportunity to speak with Greg?
No, I hadn't, but I heard your interview with him. He was the first, be honest with you, he was the first podcast I ever listened to about somebody's actual experience was him telling about him and his daddy hunting and his daddy killing a deer and then the Sasquatch taking the deer. That was, and once I listened to him, a lot of my hunting experiences started coming back to me. I'm like, man, this dude is
I,
telling me stuff that I need to know. And I really respect that guy. That is a straight up, straight shooter, honest guy. If I was going to go look for one, he would be the one I'd want to go with because I trust his judgment.
I tell you what, why don't I reach out to Greg and I forward your number to him because I think that would be a good connection. And honestly, I think it would give you some validation on some things you need validation for.
Yeah, it wouldn't bother me a bit. I mean, I have reached out to. Now I spoke with Spencer, one of his buddies, Spencer Jameson.
Hmm.
I spoke to him on Messenger, and I really would like to go to one of their outings, the meet and greets or whatever, where they go sometime when I get to where I can. I believe I would feel comfortable around that bunch of boys because they're all good old Southern country boys like me, and I think I'd feel comfortable around. And they seem like good people, all
Yeah.
good people.
So let me ask you this in closing. I will forward your information up to Greg because for some reason I think you need to connect with him and maybe talking to him will help you get more answers than I could give you. I don't consider I do go out in the woods for the experience. I do not consider myself a researcher, but he probably can give you more answers and more validation than what I can. And I am one of these people that if I can connect people and just make a better way, I'll see what I can do. He's a good person, and he's open to talk to anyone. He's just a great guy,
He
and
was a
Misty,
great guy.
Misty's just
Yeah, I like her too. She's hilarious. She's funny.
now. Do you listen to Mark and Rebecca?
Uh,
Come on
yes,
Sundays. Yeah,
yes,
they're
yes.
really. There's another lady I want you to check out. I want you to check out PJ Arkansas. PJ,
BJ. Okay,
P as in
I'll.
Paul, P as in
Okay.
Paul, J Arkansas.
Hmm.
Go on YouTube and look for her channel.
I'll do
And
it.
tell her Miss V sent you. She is really one I think you would connect with.
You know,
She's
a guy that I really thought a lot of was Scott Carpenter. Scott Carpenter was a good man. I mean, he's gone now, but uh, he's had some of the best evidence that I've ever seen as far as videos and
mhm,
recordings and all. And he seemed to have a grip on it, and he was a good Christian guy, and I think he really understood the deal, and I think he was connected with these things, and he got a lot of his videos, but when he would go on a hike, he always would connect his GoPro camera facing behind him as he was walking, and the majority of
mhm.
videos he got was from behind him that he didn't see until he went through his videos. He was
Um,
a
Now, when I first got into the community, I had a lot of conversations with Scott, and I considered him a friend, and he was a friend, and he taught me a lot. But the thing I liked about Scott held his ground on what he believed. He didn't apologize
right.
for it.
Yeah, I respect that too.
I'm going to email you one more podcast that I think you enjoy, and that's O-Line Cryptids, because Jeff Yarrington, and I always slaughter his name, he or he was trying to locate a deer his friend shot. And this happened a couple weeks ago. And when they went into that area, there was no deer, but there was blood everywhere, a blood bath, just like you described. And he is another one that I also told your number to, because he can tell you guys can compare notes on that. He's a
Hmm.
great guy, but it's old line cryptids, and they are great. They are just great. And that's my buddy.
Yeah,
And
I enjoy listening to podcasts. To be honest with you, I hate to say it. That's what I do every night. As I'm going to bed, I'm listening to podcasts, and I fall asleep listening to them every night. I mean, I rarely watch TV anymore because I mean, I'm fascinated with the subject. I went down a rabbit hole. Uh, uh,
do you ever
Never thought I would be interested in this. Never thought that.
yeah, do you ever listen to Bigfoot Society, Jeremiah?
Yeah, yeah, I like. Yeah, I like it.
Jeremiah's tough, but I
Yeah,
like Jeremiah. But
yeah.
in closing, is there anything you want to put out there?
No, just uh, if something happens, tell somebody. I mean, you're not crazy. If you know what happened, you know, I'm the type of person. I don't really care if somebody believes me or not. I know what happened. I don't know. I can't sit here and say that I had a Bigfoot encounter, but the evidence from everything I've listened to is that I probably did. You know, I mean, I've heard enough. There's enough people out there that tell these same experiences, and what they tell is what happened when this thing come by me. I mean, it's you know, from the being quiet to the noise it made coming through to the feeling I had about something wasn't right. All of that, I've heard that so many times from so many different people. That's not a coincidence.
When it comes to your experience, stand your ground and make no apologies
Well,
to
I'm
and don't let anyone try to tell you what did or didn't have. If they weren't there, you know what
no,
I say? I say when it comes to the Bigfoot police, they have no power over me. And
no,
when it comes to people like that in the community that want to be the Bigfoot police in your story, you just say, hey, excuse me, you weren't there. You don't pay my bills. You don't put food on the table. Have a good day. And just leave it alone and keep going, because they only have the power that you give them. And it is what it is. but I believe you were right among the Sasquatch many times and you didn't realize it.
Uh,
And
I, I I look back on it and I have no doubt. I mean, those wasn't woodpeckers that were knocking on those trees. I mean, I knew that then, but I didn't have nothing else to call it other than a giant woodpecker on a big dead hollow tree. Had no idea. And it was always three times, and then three times, which is woodpeckers don't normally go in a pattern like that. You know, they might knock 10 times, they might knock two times. I mean, but it was too loud to be a woodpecker, too loud. And what I really believe that I look back on it was they were letting each other know I was in there hunting. I believe that.
they could have took you out if they wanted to, but they
Oh yeah,
didn't.
they no doubt about it. I mean, these things could. So many people could be dead if these things wanted. I mean, from the description you get from different people, 8 to 12 foot tall, 1,200 pounds, you ain't got a chance. Your gun ain't got a chance. No gun you got's gonna kill anything like that before it has time to kill you. I mean,
Do you think they're behind some of these hunters that go missing?
I think probably, like I said, there's good ones and there's bad ones. And I think if a hunter tries to shoot one or threaten to shoot one, they're going to do whatever they got to do to defend themselves. And I believe there's bad apples in every group of people. I mean, I believe there's some of them out there that are bad apples, and but I believe the majority of them are good. I believe the majority of them don't want to harm us. They're as interested in us as we are them. They just don't want to. They want to keep their distance and observe and watch us. I think they're curious. I think a lot of these people that get messed with at these campsites, I think that are the young juveniles that do the same thing that young boys do when they're young, messing with people, toilet paper in their house, going up and knocking on people's windows. I think it's the same thing. I think they do it for fun, entertainment. I think we're entertained.
Have you ever listened to Flat Rock's story?
Yeah, I have. I like it.
Yeah,
I like him.
yeah, he's good people. Well, I say, in the community, you'll find the people that you click with, and it's okay to be different. It's okay not to believe the same as another person
Right,
believes. But what's not okay is when we quit talking to each other.
right.
And
You just gotta listen to everybody and form your own opinion of what you think's going on. And I've done that, and I'm comfortable with what I believe. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I'm comfortable with what I think about the whole thing. I think they exist. And I first started hearing about Dogman, I didn't even want to even consider nothing about that. And then I started listening to some podcasts like I did with Bigfoot and started realizing, well, these people are seeing these things and they're doing the same thing all over the place. And I started investigating and then realized, these things, dog-headed peoples existed since back in the Bible days. I mean, there's, like I said, there's drawings of them in hieroglyphs in Egypt right now. I mean, dog-headed people.
well,
And I
that's
think,
go ahead.
well, one of the saints is it Saint Christopher. Somebody was supposed to be a
Hmm.
dog-headed person until a certain point.
Hmm.
I mean,
That's correct.
that's you can call that rumor or whatever, but it's basically history. People wouldn't tell stuff like that if it wasn't true. And as far as Sasquatch goes, they've been drawing Sasquatch and Bigfoots on caves and the side of rocks for 3 or 4 thousand years. And those people had no reason to hoax it back in. No, they were just drawing what they saw. And the Indians, every Indian tribe there is, they 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 don't even excuse they don't even question
Bless you.
whether these things exist or not. It's reality to them. It's just another. I mean, they're on their totem pole. It's just something their people have lived with forever, and that tells you something right there.
So when you're talking about the canine cryptid or dog man. Now I saw one. So let's take. Well, I'm not exactly normal, and I'm not the brightest crayon in the box, but I'm very grounded. But when you're having people that experience something like a dog man or a Sasquatch, and they need to talk to someone, the first thing society tells you is you saw a bear or you're crazy, you didn't see it. That is why I kind of am glad my show took a hard right turn to where I concentrate more on the people than the experience. Because when you see these people, they're normal people, they've had normal lives, they've survived challenges in their life, you know, and you hear about them as a person, it's kind of hard to call them crazy. And
Yeah,
I,
I was sort of on that side of the fence where I thought the people talking about dog man and werewolves were a little bit strange until hearing the stories over and over and over from different people and hearing the same thing over and over and over. And I realized, well, it's no different than Sasquatch.
and
No
these are
different. It's the
normal.
same.
Mhm. And
And
these are normal.
I think they're probably the same thing as the Sasquatch are as far as, you know, the fallen angels mated with women, they mated with animals and all kinds of stuff. And I think they all probably are from that Nephilim line. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying
So
I'm
what?
right.
So what do you think of the uptick of sightings? Do you think it's because of the internet, or people are more talking about it now, or do you think there is an absolute uptick in sightings? That there's a thinning of the veil that
Because of the internet connecting everybody together and all the information's out there and the technology is growing and the ability to learn from other people what to do to have experiences and there's more people out there looking for them now. There just is. Like when I was 30 years old, you never heard anybody, there was no internet. You didn't hear anybody talking about any of that stuff. And unless you had an experience, you wouldn't have no reason to be out there looking. But now it's just so much information.
I agree. I agree. Well, I have had you on for almost an hour and a half, and I have thoroughly enjoyed you. And
I've enjoyed it too.
one of the things that still amazes me is that you chose my show, and that humbles me, and I'm very grateful
And
for your time.
that should tell you that you're doing something right because there's not. I don't I don't feel comfortable talking to many people. I'm sort of a introvert about. Like I said, I never even told anybody about this period until about 6 months ago. I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to hear the people saying you're crazy or you're lying or whatever. And then once I started just listening and listening and listening, and I didn't find you up first. I don't know how I stumbled across you, but once I did, I've got certain shows that I listen to. I listen to every one of your shows. I listened to two of your shows last night, and I just felt like your outlook on it and your attitude toward the whole thing was. I felt like I'd feel comfortable talking to you, and I mean that's just because you're obviously doing something right in my opinion. Everybody may not like you. Some people don't like people that are blunt and straightforward. I do. I want you to tell me exactly what's on your mind. And if you don't like what I'm doing, I want you to tell me. Don't talk to somebody else about it. Tell me what I'm doing wrong because I may be doing something wrong. And
And
I
I
respect the
appreciate
fact that you're willing to do that.
Well, I appreciate you, and I can promise you, I've got some really great podcaster friends that will jerk me in line when I start to, kind of get out there, and they give good advice. And there's been times when I've wanted to throw in the towel, and I have not. And one of those people, of course, Mark, Rebecca, and Misty, Greg, Jeff Yardson. I love Jeff, but Fred from subarctic Alaska. He is blunt. He if I need some advice, he does not sugarcoat it. He tells me exactly how it is, and I'm grateful for those friendships.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
those people have helped me on along the way, and those people, you included, will always have a seat at my table. And I'm glad
Yeah,
you're
you
part
can
of
tell
the
if somebody loves you if they're willing to tell you when you're wrong or doing something wrong.
family. Oh
They're willing to. That's the people that love you because they care about
Oh yeah, now Mark Green kind of snatched me back, and he kind of snatched me by my ear. I was getting a little testy, and I was getting
you.
a little testy about something, and he was like, "Leave it." I was like, "Yes, sir." But now at the end of each show, and that's because I'm not perfect, but I do try to be kind. But at the end of each show, I give everybody the opportunity to pay tribute to someone. It does not have to be anything Bigfoot related. Is there anyone you would like to take a few moments just to acknowledge?
Uh, my dad, which is gone, which taught me to be who I am, and I miss very much, and was one of the best men that ever lived, in my opinion. And I know everybody's dad may or may have not been, but he was just that kind of person. I mean, and I like to pay tribute to him. That's who I would, I miss him to this day. He would have
Well,
told me I'm crazy if I had told him this story, though.
it's okay. Dads are allowed to.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Greg, I'm gonna let you go. I'm grateful and very humbled for your time, and you stay in touch. And you got my number. You call me or text me anytime, and I'm going to reach out to Greg because I think
Okay.
you would really enjoy that conversation. I think he'd
I'd
enjoy
love
it.
to talk to him. I'd love to talk to him.
All right. Well, you have a good
You
evening
have
and
a
God
good one
bless.
too, and I've enjoyed it.
All right. You take care, Greg.
Thank you, fella.
All right. It has ended. So, do you feel better about telling your story now?